There is only one way to happiness, and that is to cease worrying about the things which are beyond the power of our will. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. The greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today. You are arranging what lies in fortune's control and abandoning what lies in yours. What are you looking at? To what goal are you straining? The whole future lies in uncertainty. Live immediately. Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of things. Thus death is nothing terrible, else it would have appeared so to Socrates. But the terror consists in our notion of death, that it is terrible. When therefore we are hindered, or disturbed, or grieved, let us never impute it to others, but to ourselves, that is, to our own views. It is the action of an uninstructed person to reproach others for his own misfortunes, of one entering upon instruction to reproach himself, and of one perfectly instructed to reproach neither others or himself. They lose the day in expectation of the night, and the night in fear of the dawn. He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has. Live a good life. If there are gods and they are just, then they will not care how devout you have been, but will welcome you based on the virtues you have lived by. If there are gods, but unjust, then you should not want to worship them. If there are no gods, then you will be gone, but will have lived a noble life that will live on in the memories of your loved ones. If you really want to escape the things that harass you, what you're needing is not to be in a different place, but to be a different person. True happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future, not to amuse ourselves with either hopes or fears, but to rest satisfied with what we have, which is sufficient. For he that is so wants nothing. The greatest blessings of mankind are within us, and within our reach. A wise man is content with his lot, whatever it may be, without wishing for what he has not. For what prevents us from saying that the happy life is to have a mind that is free, lofty, fearless and steadfast, a mind that is placed beyond the reach of fear, beyond the reach of desire, that counts virtue the only good, baseness the only evil, and all else but a worthless mass of things which come and go without increasing or diminishing the highest good, and neither subtracting any part from the happy life, nor add any part to it. A man thus grounded must, whether he wills or not, necessarily be attended by constant cheerfulness, and a joy that is deep and issues from deep within, since he finds delight in his own resources, and desires no joys greater than his inner joys. When someone wrongs you, ask yourself what made him do it. Once you understand his concept of good and evil, you'll feel sorry for him and cease to either be amazed or angry. If his concept is similar to yours, then you will be bound to forgive him, since you would have acted as he did in similar circumstances. But if you do not share his ideas of good and evil, then you should find it easier to overlook the wrongs of someone who is confused and in a moral muddle. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. Don't explain your philosophy, embody it. First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Any person capable of angering you becomes your master. He can anger you only when you permit yourself to be disturbed by him. Circumstances don't make the man, they only reveal him to himself. Don't seek to have events happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do happen, and all will be well with you. God has entrusted me with myself. No man is free who is not master of himself. A man should live so that his happiness shall depend as little as possible on external things. Know you not that a good man does nothing for appearance sake, but for the sake of having done right? If you live in harmony with nature, you will never be poor. If you live according to what others think, you will never be rich. All cruelty springs from weakness. Nothing, to my way of thinking, is a better proof of a well-ordered mind than a man's ability to stop just where he is and pass some time in his own company. A gift consists not in what is done or given, but in the intention of the giver or doer. You act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire. If a man knows not to which port he sails, no wind is favorable. You live as if you were destined to live forever. No thought of your frailty ever enters your head. Of how much time has already gone by, you take no heed. You squander time as if you drew from a full and abundant supply, though all the while that day which you bestow on some person or thing is perhaps your last. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. How much time he gains who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does or thinks, but only at what he does himself, to make it just and holy. Begin each day by telling yourself, I shall be met with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness, all of them due to the offender's ignorance of what is good or evil. But for my part, I have long perceived the nature of good and its nobility, the nature of evil and its meanness, and also the nature of the culprit himself, who is my brother. Not in the physical sense, but as a fellow creature similarly endowed with reason and a share of the divine. Therefore none of those things can injure me, for nobody can implicate me in what is degrading. Neither can I be angry with my brother, or fall foul of him, for he and I were born to work together, like a man's two hands, feet or eyelids, or the upper and lower rows of his teeth. To obstruct each other is against nature's law, and what is irritation or aversion but a form of obstruction? If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, "He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone." It seems to often do more harm than good to live in resentment and disdain for the world around us. The world we find ourselves in, its past and present, its people, and the rise and fall of its cultures and practices are all the way they are. They are not the way we personally want them to be. When we resist the reality of the world around us, and instead project onto it our expectation about how the world should be, we are often met with a certain level of internal resistance. Resistance that can cause us to suffer. And the greater the distance between reality and our expectation, the greater the resistance. The world is what it is. It is not what we expect it to be. Learn to accept life. Learn to love fate and all that it brings. This is the Stoic principle of amor fati, to love fate. After all, fate has given us the ability to live and to experience life. Unfortunately, amor fati often gets confused with a passive, defeatist acceptance of the world around us. To accept the wrongs of the world and to lie down as we observe the passing of things we don't agree with, or the wrongdoing we see being committed. But I believe this is a misunderstanding of the Stoic principle. Acceptance of reality does not mean to submit to it. It is simply learning the ability to see it objectively and accepting that in this moment that is the state of the world. It is the ability to look at the things around us clearly, not through the lens of our own bias and expectations. In doing so, we are better able to understand the situations around us, the reality of the situations we find ourselves in. Unblinded by the lens of our own bias and expectations, we then are able to more clearly understand what is within our control and what is not, and then look to leverage that control to effect change first in ourselves, and then, if possible, in the world around us for the better. Whenever you feel anger towards a person, think of what led them to behave in such a way. It is all too easy for us to pass judgment from our own perspective, but it is a very different thing to try and put yourself in the shoes of the wrongdoer and try to understand what hardship they have gone through, what burden they might carry, or how life has treated them leading up to the moment which you found so offensive. Most people are trying to do the best they can with what they have. And while we all are responsible for our actions, there is often a line to draw between a person's experience and their behavior. To me, one of the great ironies of life is a man's desire to find comfort, to remove all sources of hardship and suffering in favor of comfort. When applied to our core needs like food, shelter, security, and companionship, comfort and stability to me do make sense, but when it exceeds to every corner of our lives, comfort and the removal of all hardship seems to me to bring with it its own brand of hardship. Instead of putting ourselves into the unknown, expanding our comfort zone and learning to deal with the adversity that comes with it, excessive comfort seems to risk the opposite. It erodes our resilience to hardship, can breed purposelessness, apathy, sloth, and the host of limitations that come with a shrinking comfort circle. It seems to me that one of the lesser thought of challenges of modern life is to balance the comfort that comes when our base needs are met with the voluntary hardship that is needed to make sure that comfort doesn't soften our resolve. The ancient Stoics advocated voluntary hardship. Marcus Aurelius chose to sleep on an uncomfortable bed. Seneca chose to swim in rivers in the dead of winter. Both men were all too aware of the risks of becoming too comfortable and the benefits of adding discomfort to one's life. Day to day, we often distance ourselves from death, often thinking that it is something that happens to others or to us many, many years from now. But the truth is that death is at our shoulder every day, an ever-present fact of life. Today may very well be your last. Living with this as a reminder brings with it a deep gratitude for many of the things we take for granted, knowing that whatever it is may be one of the last few times we are able to experience it, whether that be sound of leaves in the wind, the company of those we love, or simply the taste of good food. To the Stoics, this was the practice of memento mori, the practice of remembering death. The nature of life is change. From the very first shifts of the universe, the most simple of elements gathered together to produce clouds, and then solid bodies, bodies that began to form the very first ingredients for life. Those ingredients formed life, the circle of birth and death, until eventually they came together in the exact configuration needed to create you and me. Like the beginning, the peak, and the crashing end of a wave, our lives are simply part of a grander cycle. We are formed, we experience, and we end. And with our end comes the opportunity for the reconfiguration of our atoms, to allow another to come and go, and to enjoy the experience of life, and so on forever. The nature of the entire universe is change, from the very big to the very small. Lives are often not made better in the accomplishments of lofty goals, or the collection of expensive things, so much as they are improved by the small day-to-day changes of one's habits. The decisions to wake up a little earlier, get out of the house a little more often, go for a run, read that book that's been gathering dust, or try to be more present in the company of the things and people we love. While of course great achievements do contribute to it, habits built over time, not short bursts of joy, are often the paving stones to a happier life. There is a delicate balance to be had when looking to the future and the past. The future is necessary for long-term planning and preparation for events that seem likely to happen. However, look too long towards the horizon and it's easy to let life slip by and miss the very thing you spent all that time planning and preparing for. Similarly, the past can be used as a tool to learn, but looking back to what was may also mean that you missed the life into which you've taken all the lessons of the past. The future can be used to plan and prepare. The past can be used to learn. But life only happens in the present. When I meet death, as we all must do, the time and place will be largely outside of my control. If tomorrow, then I will die tomorrow. And if a year from now or 20 years from now, then I will meet it then. It is in the very nature of a living thing to die, regardless of how much we resist it. However, for now, I am alive, so I will put to use what is within my control, and decide what to do with the time that is given to me. I am not soothing you or making light of your misfortune. If fate can be overcome by tears, let us bring tears to bear upon it. Let every day be passed in mourning, every night be spent in sorrow instead of sleep. Let your breast be torn by your own hands, your very face attacked by them, and every kind of cruelty be practiced by your grief, if it will profit you. But if the dead cannot be brought back to life, however much we may beat our breasts, if destiny remains fixed and immovable forever, not to be changed by any sorrow however great, and death does not loose his hold on anything that he has once taken away, then let our futile grief be brought to an end. Let us then steer our own course, and no longer allow ourselves to be driven to leeward by the force of our misfortune. He is a sorry pilot who lets the waves wring his rudder from his grasp, who leaves the sails to fly loose, and abandons the ship to the storm. But he who boldly grasps the helm, and clings to it until the sea closes over him, deserves praise, even though he be shipwrecked. Never let the future disturb you. You will meet it if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present. There are misfortunes which strike the sage, without incapacitating him, of course, such as physical pain, infirmity, the loss of friends or children, or the catastrophes of his country when it is devastated by war. I grant that he is sensitive to these things, for we do not impute to him the hardness of rock or of iron. There is no virtue in putting up with that which one does not feel. And they say that there is this difference between the mind of a foolish man and that of a wise man, that the foolish man thinks that such visions are in fact as dreadful and terrifying as they appear at the original impact of them on his mind, and by his assent he approves of such ideas as if they were rightly to be feared, and confirms them. But the wise man, after being affected for a short time, and slightly in his colour and expression, does not assent, but retains the steadfastness and strength of the opinion which he has always had about visions of this kind, namely that they are in no wise to be feared, but excite terror by a false appearance and vain alarms. Don't you know life is like a military campaign? One must serve on watch, another in reconnaissance, another on the front line. So it is for us. Each person's life is a kind of battle, and a long and varied one too. You must keep watch like a soldier, and do everything commanded. You have been stationed in a key post, not some lowly place, and not for a short time, but for life. Seek not for events to happen as you wish, but wish events to happen as they do, and your life will go smoothly. The chief task in life is simply this: to identify and separate matters so that I can say clearly to myself which are externals not under my control, and which have to do with the choices I actually control. Where then do I look for good and evil? Not to uncontrollable externals, but within myself, to the choices that are my own. One ought to seek out virtue for its own sake, without being influenced by fear or hope, or by any external influence. Moreover, that in that does happiness consist. What is your art? To be good. And how is this accomplished well except by general principles, some about the nature of the universe, and others about the proper constitution of man? In our control is the most beautiful and important thing, the thing because of which even the God himself is happy, namely the proper use of our impressions. We must concern ourselves absolutely with the things that are under our control, and entrust the things not in our control to the universe. Men are disturbed not by things, but by the principles and notions which they form concerning things. It is the act of an ill-instructed man to blame others for his own bad condition. It is the act of one who has begun to be instructed to lay the blame on himself, and of one whose instruction is completed, neither to blame another nor himself. One who knows not who he is, and to what end he was born, what kind of world is this, and with whom he is associated therein? One who cannot distinguish good and evil, beauty and foulness, truth and falsehood, will never follow reason in shaping his desires and impulses and repulsions, nor yet in assent, denial or suspension of judgment, but will in one word go about deaf and blind, thinking himself to be somewhat, when he is in truth of no account. Is there anything new in all this? Is not this ignorance the cause of all the mistakes and mischances of men since the human race began? We are all chained to fortune. The chain of one is made of gold and wide, while that of another is short and rusty. But what difference does it make? The same prison surrounds all of us, and even those who have bound others are bound themselves, unless perchance you think that a chain on the left side is lighter. Honors bind one man, wealth another. Nobility oppresses some, humility others. Some are held in subjection by an external power, while others obey the tyrant within. Banishments keep some in place, the priesthood others. All life is slavery. Therefore each one must accustom himself to his own condition, and complain about it as little as possible, and lay hold to whatever good is to be found near him. Nothing is so bitter that a calm mind cannot find comfort in it. Small tablets, because of the writer's skill, have often served for many purposes, and a clever arrangement has often made a very narrow piece of land habitable. Apply reason to difficulties. Harsh circumstances can be softened, narrow limits can be widened, and burdensome things can be made to press less severely on those who bear them cleverly. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. These reasonings are unconnected. I am richer than you, therefore I am better. I am more eloquent than you, therefore I am better. The connection is rather this: I am richer than you, therefore my property is greater than yours. I am more eloquent than you, therefore my style is better than yours. But you, after all, are neither property nor style. If you have given way to anger, be sure that over and above the evil involved therein, you have strengthened the habit and added fuel to the fire. If overcome by a temptation of the flesh, do not reckon it a single defeat, but that you have also strengthened your dissolute habits. Habits and faculties are necessarily affected by the corresponding acts. One who has had fever, even when it has left him, is not in the same condition of health as before, unless indeed his cure is complete. Something of the same sort is true also of diseases of the mind. Behind, there remains a legacy of traces and of blisters, and unless these are effectually erased, subsequent blows on the same spot will produce no longer mere blisters but sores. If you do not wish to be prone to anger, do not feed the habit. Give it nothing which may tend to its increase. At first, keep quiet and count the days when you were not angry. I used to be angry every day, then every other day, next every 2, next every 3 days, and if you succeed in passing 30 days, sacrifice to the gods in thanksgiving. At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work. As a human being, what do I have to complain of if I'm going to do what I was born for, the things I was brought into the world to do? Or is this what I was created for, to huddle under the blankets and stay warm? Until we have begun to go without them, we fail to realize how unnecessary many things are. We've been using them not because we needed them, but because we had them. If you seek tranquility, do less, or more accurately, do what's essential, what the logos of a social being requires, and in the requisite way, which brings a double satisfaction, to do less better. Because most of what we say and do is not essential. If you can eliminate it, you'll have more time and more tranquility. Ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary? Riches are a cause of evil. Not because of themselves they do any evil, but because they goad men on so that they are ready to do evil. In general, any method of discipline applied to the body which tends to modify its desires or repulsions are good for ascetic ends. But if done for display, they betray at once a man who keeps an eye on outward show, who has an ulterior purpose, and is looking for spectators to shout, "Oh, what a great man!" This is why Apollonius so well said, "If you are bent upon a little private discipline, wait till you are choking with heat one day, then take a mouthful of cold water and spit it out again, and tell no man." What is not good for the beehive cannot be good for the bees. A commitment to justice in your own acts, which means thought and action resulting in the common good, what you were born to do. Men do not care how nobly they live, but only how long, although it is within the reach of every man to live nobly, but within no man's power to live long. He who is running a race ought to endeavor and strive to the utmost of his ability to come off victor, but it is utterly wrong for him to trip up his competitor or to push him aside. So in life it is not unfair for one to seek for himself what may accrue to his benefit, but it is not right to take it from another. For mankind, evil is injustice and cruelty and indifference to a neighbor's trouble, while virtue is brotherly love and goodness and justice, and beneficence and concern for the welfare of your neighbor. The courageous in exile or at home is fearless in the face of all such threats. For that reason, they've the courage to say what they think, equally at home or in exile. Philosophy does not promise to secure anything external for a man. Otherwise, it would be admitting something that lies beyond its proper subject matter. For as the material of the carpenter is wood, and that of statuary bronze, so the subject matter of the art of living is each person's own life. My advice is really this. What we hear the philosophers saying and what we find in their writings should be applied in our pursuit of the happy life. We should hunt out the helpful pieces of teaching and the spirited and noble-minded sayings which are capable of immediate practical application, not far-fetched or archaic expressions, or extravagant metaphors and figures of speech, and learn them so well that the words become works. No one, to my mind, lets humanity down quite so much as those who study philosophy, as if it were a sort of commercial skill, and then proceeds to live in a quite different manner to the one they tell other people to live. It does not matter what you bear, but how you bear it. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. The chief task in life is simply this: to identify and separate matters so that I can say clearly to myself which are externals not under my control, and which have to do with the choices I actually control. Where then do I look for good and evil, not to uncontrollable externals, but within myself, to the choices that are my own? True happiness is to enjoy the present, without anxious dependence upon the future, not to amuse ourselves with either hopes or fears, but to rest satisfied with what we have, which is sufficient. For he that is so wants nothing. The greatest blessings of mankind are within us, and within our reach. A wise man is content with his lot, whatever it may be, without wishing for what he has not. Don't seek for everything to happen as you wish it would, but rather wish that everything happens as it actually will. Then your life will flow well. If anyone can refute me, show me I'm making a mistake or looking at things from the wrong perspective, I'll gladly change. It's the truth I'm after, and the truth never harmed anyone. If you accomplish something good with hard work, the labor passes quickly, but the good endures. If you do something shameful in pursuit of pleasure, the pleasure passes quickly, but the shame endures. A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials. Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself. No person has the power to have everything they want, but it is in their power not to want what they don't have, and to cheerfully put to good use what they do have. You will earn the respect of all if you begin by earning the respect of yourself. Don't expect to encourage good deeds in people conscious of your own misdeeds. The greatest discovery of any generation is that a human can alter his life by altering his attitude. Excellence is never an accident. It is always the result of high intention, sincere effort, and intelligent execution. It represents the wise choice of many alternatives. Choice, not chance, determines your destiny. We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Man conquers the world by conquering himself. How does it help to make troubles heavier by bemoaning them? You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. You should live in such a way that there is nothing which you could not as easily tell your enemy as keep to yourself. Waking up to who you are requires letting go of who you imagine yourself to be. The high-minded man must care more for the truth than for what people think. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we should listen more than we say. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Don't promise twice what you can do once. A man who has committed a mistake and doesn't correct it is committing another mistake. He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. Remember 2 things. 1, that everything has always been the same and keeps recurring, and it makes no difference whether you see the same things recur in 100 years or 200 or in an infinite period. 2, that the longest lived and those who will die soonest lose the same thing. The present is all they can give up, since that is all you have, and what you do not have you cannot lose. Ultimately, man should not ask what the meaning of his life is, but rather he must recognize that it is he who is asked. In a word, each man is questioned by life, and he can only answer to life by answering for his own life. To life he can only respond by being responsible. No amount of anxiety makes any difference to anything that is going to happen. The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. Nothing, to my way of thinking, is a better proof of a well-ordered mind than a man's ability to stop just where he is and pass some time in his own company. The greatest weapon against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another. I begin to speak only when I'm certain what I'll say isn't better left unsaid. All Hellenistic schools seem to define wisdom in approximately the same terms, first and foremost as a state of perfect peace of mind. From this viewpoint, philosophy appears as a remedy for human worries, anguish, and misery brought about for the cynics by social constraints and conventions, for the Epicureans by the quest for false pleasures, for the Stoics by the pursuit of pleasure and egotistic self-interest, and for the skeptics by false opinions. Whether or not they lay claim to the Socratic heritage, all Hellenistic philosophers agreed with Socrates that human beings are plunged into misery, anguish, and evil because they exist in ignorance. Evil is to be found not within things, but in the value judgments which people bring to bear upon things. People can therefore be cured of their ills only if they are persuaded to change their value judgments. And in this sense, all these philosophies wanted to be therapeutic. Simplicity, patience, compassion. These three are your greatest treasures. Simple in actions and thoughts, you return to the source of being. Patient with both friends and enemies, you accord with the way things are. Compassionate towards yourself, you reconcile all beings in the world. Taoism is the art of being in the world, for it deals with the present, ourselves. It is in us that God meets with nature, and yesterday parts from tomorrow. The present is the moving infinity, the legitimate sphere of the relative. Relativity seeks adjustment. Adjustment is art. The art of life lies in a constant readjustment to our surroundings. Be content with what you have. Rejoice in the way things are. When you realize there is nothing lacking, the whole world belongs to you. Let your eyes see what they see, not what others want you to see. Let your ears hear what they naturally hear, not what others want you to hear. Let your mouth speak your mind freely, and not be constrained by other people's approval or disapproval. Let your mind think what it wants to think, and not let other people's demands dictate your thoughts. If your senses and your mind are not allowed to do what they want to do naturally, you are denying them their rights. When you cannot think, sense, feel, or act freely, then your body and mind are injured. Break these oppressions, and you will cultivate life. Be careful what you water your dreams with. Water them with worry and fear, and you will produce weeds that choke the life from your dreams. Water them with optimism and solutions, and you will cultivate success. Always be on the lookout for ways to turn a problem into an opportunity for success. Always be on the lookout for ways to nurture your dream. Strength should always be complemented by softness. If you resist too much, you will break. Thus, the strong person knows when to use strength and when to yield. And good fortune and disaster depend on whether you know how and when to yield. Those who do not know how to suffer are the worst off. There are times when the only thing we can do is to bear our troubles until a better day. To solve a problem, you need to remove the cause, not the symptom. To know and to think we know not is the crown. To not know and to think we know is the affliction. Knowing others is intelligence. Knowing yourself is true wisdom. Mastering others is strength. Mastering yourself is true power. If a branch is too rigid, it will break. Resist and you will perish. Know how to yield and you will survive. Only he who has no use for the empire is fit to be entrusted with it. At the center of your being you have the answer. You know who you are, and you know what you want. Life is a series of natural and spontaneous changes. Don't resist them. That only creates sorrow. Let reality be reality. Let things flow naturally forward into whatever way they like. Kindness in words creates confidence. Kindness in thinking creates profoundness. Kindness in giving creates love. A person with a mind is bound to be filled with conceptions. These conceptions prevent him from knowing things directly, so a person with a mind shall never really know. Trying to explain Zen is like trying to catch wind in a box. The moment you close the lid, it ceases to be wind, and in time becomes stagnant air. A good traveler has no fixed plans and is not intent on arriving. When you are content to simply be yourself and don't compare or compete, everyone will respect you. The fact is that those who do not see themselves but who see others, who fail to get a grasp of themselves but who grasp others, take possessions of what others have but fail to possess themselves. They are attracted to what others enjoy but fail to find enjoyment in themselves. If you play a game where scrap pieces of glass are at stake, you will play skillfully. If your expensive belt buckle is at stake, you'll start to get clumsy. If it's your money that's at stake, you'll fumble. It's not that you've lost your skill. It's because you're so flustered by things happening outside that you've lost your calmness inside. Lose your stillness, and you will fail in everything you do. A man with outward courage dares to die. A man with inner courage dares to live. A man like this will not go where he has no will to go, will not do what he has no mind to do. Though the world might praise him and say he had really found something, he would look unconcerned and never turn his head. Though the world might condemn him and say he has lost something, he would look serene and pay no heed. The praise and blame of the world are no loss or gain to him. Things joined by profit when pressed by misfortune and danger will cast each other aside. Let your mind wander in simplicity. Blend your spirit with the vastness. Follow along with things the way they are, and make no room for personal views. Then the world will be governed. A beam or pillar can be used to batter down a city wall, but it is no good for stopping up a little hole. This refers to a difference in function. Thoroughbreds like Qiji or Huali could gallop 1,000 li in one day, but when it came to catching rats, they were no match for the wildcat or the weasel. This refers to a difference in skill. The horned owl catches fleas at night and can spot the tip of a hair. But when daylight comes, no matter how wide it opens its eyes, it cannot see a mound or a hill. This refers to a difference in nature. Now do you say that you're going to make right your master and do away with wrong, or make order your master and do away with disorder? If you do, then you have not understood the principle of heaven and earth, or the nature of the 10,000 things. This is like saying that you're going to make heaven your master and do away with earth, or make yin your master and do away with yang. Obviously, it is impossible. We may be floating on Tao, but there is nothing wrong with steering. If Tao is like a river, it is certainly good to know where the rocks are. Great power is worry, and total power is boredom, such that even God renounces it and pretends instead that he is people and fish and insects and plants. The myth of the king who goes wandering among his subjects in disguise. Travel is such a wonderful experience, especially when you forget you are traveling. Then you will enjoy whatever you see and do. Those who look into themselves when they travel will not think about what they see. In fact, there is no distinction between the viewer and the scene. You experience everything with the totality of yourself, so that every blade of grass, every mountain, every lake is alive and is a part of you. When there is no division between you and what is other, this is the ultimate experience of traveling. To attain knowledge, add things every day. To attain wisdom, remove things every day. Those who know don't talk. Those who talk don't know. Close your mouth, block off your senses, blunt your sharpness, untie your knots, soften your glare, settle your dust. This is the primal identity. Be like the Tao. It can't be approached or withdrawn from, benefited or harmed, honored or brought into disgrace. It gives itself up continually. That is why it endures. You have only to rest in inaction, and things will transform themselves. Smash your form and body. Spit out your hearing and eyesight. Forget you are a thing among other things, and you might join in great unity with the deep and boundless. The Tao is clear, yet this clarity requires you to sweep away all your clutter. At all times, watch out for your own stupidity. Be careful of how your mind jumps around. When nothing occurs to involve your mind, you return to true awareness. When unified mindfulness is purely real, you comprehend the great restoration. The ridiculous ones are those who try to cultivate quietude. As long as body and mind are unstable, it is madness to go into the mountains. When two things occur successively, We call them cause and effect if we believe one event made the other one happen. If we think one event is the response to the other, we call it a reaction. If we feel that the two incidents are not related, we call it a mere coincidence. If we think someone deserved what happened, we call it a retribution or reward depending on whether the event was negative or positive for the recipient. If we cannot find a reason for the two events occurring simultaneously or in close proximity, we call it an accident. Therefore, how we explain coincidences depends on how we see the world. Is everything connected so that events create resonances like ripples across a net? Or do things merely co-occur and we give meaning to these co-occurrences based on our belief system? Lao Tzu's answer, it's all in how you think. When meditation is mastered, the mind is unwavering like the flame of a lamp in a windless place. In the still mind, in the depths of meditation, the self reveals itself. Beholding the self by means of the self, an aspirant knows the joy and peace of complete fulfillment. Having attained that abiding joy beyond the senses, revealed in the stilled mind, he never swerves from the eternal truth. You have the right to work, but for the work's sake only. You have no rights to the fruits of work. Desire for the fruits of work must never be your motive in working. Never give way to laziness either. Perform every action with your heart fixed on the Supreme Lord. Renounce attachment to the fruits. Be even-tempered in success and failure, for it is this evenness of temper which is meant by yoga. Work done with anxiety about results is far inferior to the work done without such anxiety, in the calm of self-surrender. Seek refuge in the knowledge of Brahma. They who work selfishly for results are miserable. In this world, 3 gates lead to hell. The gates of passion, anger, and greed. Released from these 3 qualities, one can succeed in attaining salvation and reaching the highest goal. You are what you believe in. You become that which you believe you can become. Man is made by his belief. As he believes, so he is. Seek refuge in the attitude of detachment, and you will amass the wealth of spiritual awareness. The one who is motivated only by desire for the fruits of their action and anxious about the results is miserable indeed. When a man dwells on the pleasure of sense, attraction for them arises in him. From attraction arises desire, the lust of possession, and this leads to passion, to anger. From passion comes confusion of the mind, then loss of remembrance, the forgetting of duty. From this loss comes the ruin of reason, and the ruin of reason leads man to destruction. Look to this day, for it is life, the very life of life. In its brief course lie all the truths and realities of your existence, the bliss of growth, the glory of action, and the splendor of beauty. For yesterday is but a dream, and tomorrow is only a vision. But today well lived makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well therefore to this day. Such is the salvation of the dawn. The soul who meditates on the self is content to serve the self and rests satisfied within the self. There remains nothing more for him to accomplish. One who performs his duty without attachment, surrendering the results unto the Supreme Lord, is unaffected by sinful action, as the lotus is untouched by water. One who has control over the mind is tranquil in heat and cold, in pain and pleasure, and in honor and dishonor, and is ever steadfast with the Supreme Self. One should strive to employ oneself to uplift oneself. One should never dishonor oneself. The self is one's friend, as well as one's enemy. It is both near and far, both within and without every creature. It moves and is unmoving. In its subtlety, it is beyond comprehension. It is invisible, yet appears divided in separate creatures. Know it to be the Creator, the Preserver, and the Destroyer. Dwelling in every heart, it is beyond darkness. It is called the light of the lights, the object and goal of knowledge, and knowledge itself. It is better to strive in one's own Dharma than to succeed in the Dharma of another. Nothing is ever lost in following one's own Dharma, but competition in another's Dharma breeds fear and insecurity. For him who has no concentration, there is no tranquility. Death is as sure for that which is born, as birth is for that which is dead. Therefore grieve not for what is inevitable. Delusion arises from anger. The mind is bewildered by delusion. Reasoning is destroyed when the mind is bewildered. One falls down when reasoning is destroyed. Endurance is one of the most difficult disciplines, but it is to the one who endures that the final victory comes. Let us rise up and be thankful, for if we didn't learn a lot, at least we learnt a little. And if we didn't learn a little, at least we didn't get sick. And if we got sick, at least we didn't die. So let us be thankful. All that we are is the result of what we have thought. It is founded on our thoughts and made up of our thoughts. If a man speaks or acts with an evil thought, suffering follows him, as the wheel follows the hoof of the beast that draws the wagon. If a man speaks or acts with a good thought, happiness follows him like a shadow that never leaves. Holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. One moment can change a day, one day can change a life, and one life can change the world. Be where you are, otherwise you will miss your life. Kindness should be the natural way of life, not the exception. It is better to travel well than to arrive. To live a pure, unselfish life, one must count nothing as one's own in the midst of abundance. Whatever a monk keeps pursuing with his thinking and pondering, that becomes the inclination of his awareness. A man is not called wise because he talks and talks again. But if he is peaceful, loving, and fearless, then he is in truth called wise. You will not be punished for your anger. You will be punished by your anger. Just as the great ocean has one taste, the taste of salt, so also this teaching and discipline has one taste, the taste of liberation. The root of suffering is attachment. Your work is to discover your world, and then, with all your heart, give yourself to it. There is no fire like passion. There is no shark like hatred. There is no snare like folly. There is no torrent like greed. Do not dwell in the past. Do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment. Happiness will never come to those who fail to appreciate what they already have. What you are basically deep down, far in, is simply the fabric and structure of existence itself. I have realized that the past and the future are real illusions, that they exist in the present, which is what there is, and all there is. You are a function of what the whole universe is doing, in the same way that a wave is a function of what the whole ocean is doing. Tomorrow and plans for tomorrow can have no significance at all unless you are in full contact with the reality of the present, since it is in the present and only in the present that you live. There is no other reality than present reality, so that even if one were to live for endless ages, to live for the future would be to miss the point everlastingly. The meaning of life is just to be alive. It is so plain and so obvious and so simple, and yet everybody rushes around in a great panic, as if it were necessary to achieve something beyond themselves. When you get free from certain fixed conceptions of the way the world is, you find it is far more subtle and far more miraculous than you thought it was. You are an aperture through which the universe is looking at and exploring itself. The only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance. A scholar tries to learn something every day. A student of Buddhism tries to unlearn something every day. I'll tell you what the hermits realize. If you go off into a far, far forest and get very quiet, you'll come to understand that you're connected with everything. If then my awareness of the past and future makes me less aware of the present, I must begin to wonder whether I am actually living in the real world. Meditation is the discovery that the point of life is always arrived at in the immediate moment. The only Zen you'll find on the mountaintop is the Zen you bring up there with you. Muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone. Every intelligent individual wants to know what makes him tick, and yet is at once fascinated and frustrated by the fact that oneself is the most difficult of all things to know. Problems that remain persistently insoluble should always be suspected as questions asked in the wrong way. One is a great deal less anxious if one feels perfectly free to be anxious, and the same may be said of guilt. If you say that getting the money is the most important thing, you'll spend your life completely wasting your time. You'll be doing things you don't like doing in order to go on living. That is to go on doing things you don't like doing, which is stupid. When we attempt to exercise power or control over someone else, we cannot avoid giving that person the very same power or control over us. Things are as they are. Looking out into the universe at night, we make no comparisons between right and wrong stars, nor between well and badly arranged constellations. Philosophy is a man's expression of curiosity about everything, and his attempt to make sense of the world, primarily through his intellect. Zen does not confuse spirituality while thinking about God while one is peeling potatoes. Zen spirituality is just to peel the potatoes. If we cling to belief in God, we cannot likewise have faith, since faith is not clinging, but letting go. What we have forgotten is that thoughts and words are conventions, and that it is fatal to take conventions too seriously. A convention is a social convenience, as for example money. But it is absurd to take money too seriously, to confuse it with real wealth. In somewhat the same way, thoughts, ideas, and words are coins for real things. Other people teach us who we are. Their attitudes to us are the mirror in which we learn to see ourselves, but the mirror is distorted. We are perhaps rather dimly aware of the immense power of our social environment. It's like you took a bottle of ink and threw it at the wall. Smash! And all that ink spread. And in the middle it is dense, isn't it? And as it gets out to the edge, the little droplets get finer and finer, and make more complicated patterns, see? So in the same way, there was a big bang at the beginning of things, and it spread. And you and I, sitting here in this room as complicated human beings, are way, way out on the fringe of that bang. We are the complicated little patterns at the end of it. Very interesting. But so we define ourselves as being only that. If you think that you are only inside your skin, you define yourself as one very complicated little curlicue, way out on the edge of that explosion, way out in space and way out in time. Billions of years ago you were a big bang, but now you're a complicated human being. And then we cut ourselves off and don't feel that we're still the big bang, but you are. Depending on how you define yourself, you actually are. If this is the way things started, if there was a big bang in the beginning, you're not something that's a result of the big bang. You're not something that is a sort of puppet on the end of the process. You are still the process. You are the big bang. The original force of the universe coming on as whoever you are. When I meet you, I see not just what you define yourself as, Mr. So-and-so, Miss So-and-so, Mrs. So-and-so. I see every one of you as the primordial energy of the universe, coming on at me in this particular way. I know I am that too, but we've learned to define ourselves as separate from it. Just as a snake sheds its skin, we must shed our past over and over again. What you are is what you have been. What you will be is what you do now. Even as a solid rock is unshaken by the wind, so were the wise unshaken by praise or blame. Thousands of candles can be lit from a single candle, and the life of the candle will not be shortened. Happiness never decreases by being shared. We are shaped by our thoughts. We become what we think. When the mind is pure, joy follows like a shadow that never leaves. Every morning we are born again. What we do today is what matters most. Do not look for sanctuary in anyone except yourself. If you propose to speak, always ask yourself, is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? No one saves us but ourselves. No one can and no one may. We ourselves must walk the path. The secret of health, for both mind and body, is not to mourn for the past, nor worry about the future, but to live the present moment wisely and earnestly. Drop by drop is the water pot filled. Likewise the wise man, gathering it little by little, fills himself with good. There is nothing so disobedient as an undisciplined mind, and there is nothing so obedient as a disciplined mind. If you find no one to support you on your spiritual path, walk alone. Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. Have compassion for all beings, rich and poor alike. Each has their suffering. Some suffer too much, others too little. If your compassion does not include yourself, it is incomplete. Hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal rule. Nothing can harm you as much as your own thoughts unguarded. In the sky, there is no distinction of east and west. People create distinctions out of their own minds, and then believe them to be true. If we fail to look after others when they need help, who will look after us? A generous heart, kind speech, and a life of service and compassion are the things which renew humanity. An idea that is developed and put into action is more important than an idea that exists only as an idea.